You know the saying, let your vibe attract your tribe? I've been thinking a lot about that saying lately. And when I'm sitting here in these moments and I'm asking myself that why question, one word really comes to mind: community. And I realized why that word comes up so much for me, you know? And I imagine since you're part of the HIListically Speaking podcast community, or you're a member of my Hug It Out collective on Facebook, or whatever it is that you do to stay connected, you too value community. Community is connection, right? It's trust. It's I'm not alone in the battle. And it's saying, I got you. It's a vibe. I met Roberto in 2015 when we both became part of the Daily Burn community, the live streaming fitness show that you've heard me talk about many times. And being a host of that show comes with a big responsibility. It's a good thing that he has a personality that matches that. JD is all about putting out the good vibes, right? Both on and off camera. But there's so much more to this host with the most that has made him a better human being. And he shares that right here on the show with you. From the relationships and the lessons that he has learned from his parents and in his own marriage. That includes a love story that will have you grabbing for the tissues. I promise you that. He gets real about his work-life balance outside of the studio and why it's really making quite a big difference in the world. Plus, he shares his own self-care routine. It's great to know what other people are doing, right? And what he's doing to keep the good vibes going. And yes, to those JD fans out there, and I know there are many, he even is answering some of your questions that I know you're dying to know. It's time to raise the vibe. You know when you know the timing's just right?
Yeah, totally. I do.
The timing's right. So thank you for
I
being
think the
here.
timing's right. I'm really grateful for the invite. First of all, I love chatting with you. You and I have had so many good conversations over the years that were not recorded. And then we're like, man, somebody should have recorded that. We dug into some good stuff there. So here's our chance to make up for lost time.
You just walk around with paparazzi and a camera and a microphone and just let's do it. Yeah, it is. It's perfect timing. So first of all, I hope you've had a great summer. I hope everything's going well with you and your family. And I know there are so many people out there. We're going to ask some questions later. We have some people that know you just from knowing you, and that's the thing, like with you and I and what we do, people just feel like they know you, even if they've never met you,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of a challenge. Like, I always say to people, the idea of the thing is not the same as the thing. So I worry that I want the idea of JD to be the same as the thing as JD. Mm-hmm. I don't want to BS people. I just want to, if you see me on your screen or on your Facebook page or on your feed, and then you met me in person, I would hope that you would meet the same person in both places. That's really totally my goal.
You are like that. I could stand here and say the first day I met you back in August of 2015, you were exactly the same guy that you are on camera. And I want to have that kind of vibe too. I think it's just being yourself. It's just turning the light on and reaching that audience of one, which tends to reach millions if you're lucky. And yeah. You've been doing this for a really long time. You've been sharing the space with millions of people through that camera lens for years, but you have a history that goes before that, before even getting on camera. And I'd love for you to share that and tell us how you got into this kind of work.
Oh, that's interesting. So I'll go all the way back. So I grew up in Wisconsin when I was really little. I lived in Wisconsin, Oshkosh, Wisconsin, home of the By Gosh store.
I had a pair of the overalls.
Yeah, I did too. I had it's kind of mandatory. It's a uniform. Yeah. And when I was about 9 years old, my folks split up and my mom met a new guy and she wanted to get out of Wisconsin. So she moved to Texas and I went with her, which was a really weird arrangement because I had two older brothers who did not go with her. So from 9 years old on, I grew up as an only child, even though I had two brothers who still lived in Wisconsin. We lived 3,000 miles away. Ugly divorce, messy divorce. I don't know if there's any such thing as a not ugly divorce, but this one was particularly bad. And so then I grew up from about 9.5 or 10. I grew up in Texas, Fort Worth, Texas. Mm-hmm. When people ask me where I grew up, I usually say Texas because I feel like that whole middle school, high school is so formative. I got into theater, maybe because I just needed attention at that point in my life. I went to college for theater. I went to state school in Texas. I went to Texas A&M University, and I met a professor there who said, I think you're a terrific kid. And remember, I have like no father figure in my life at this point, and he's kind of becomes my father figure. And he says, you need to get out of Texas. You need to go study theater in New York. He rode away because there was no internet to NYU, got me an application, paid for my flight to go up. I auditioned, I got in, and I ended up finishing up my degree, doing the last 2 years of my degree at NYU. So I had a theater degree, and I was going to be an actor, and I did a bunch of theater in New York. But then at some point, and I'm really trying to truncate this incredibly long story, at some point I got an audition to host a game show, which I thought was ridiculous. But of course, I'm trying to pay off my student loan, so I did. And I got the job. And 30 years later, my resume is 90% hosting, 10% acting, I guess 5% writing, but now we're 105%. So I don't know. As you can see, I have an arts degree. I didn't do the math.
I love that story because for those out there listening, and I do have a lot of people, a lot of listeners and viewers as well for Holistically Speaking who are in the arts, who are theater majors, who have graduated from theater, who are actors, who are hosts, who are doing just about everything. But that story can be really related to just anything you do because there's nothing to say that life is not a falling into. Right? We have this plan, we have this idea. And I was the same way. I was a theater minor and radio TV major, thinking I was going to go to New York right after college, going to school in Texas. We have so many parallels. I never even, I'm just thinking about that now. Where'd you go to school in Texas? I went to SMU in Dallas.
Southern Methodist, great school, by the way.
Well, Aggies as well, right? Yeah. But and thinking I was going to go right to New York afterwards. But there's like shifts and changes and weaves and it's all part of the experience. And look where you are now. So it just goes to show that anything can happen if you put your mind to it, right? Yeah. And something that you thought maybe wasn't there prior. You never even thought about, I'll be a game show host. That became part of such a big part of your life. And you've done some pretty big game shows, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I was in Los Angeles at a really fortunate time when they were still casting nobodies. Yeah. If you had hosting skill, that was all you needed. Right now, if you're not Mario Lopez or Ryan Seacrest, you're probably not going to work. But back in the day, if you could just host, if you just had that skill set, you could work. I hosted a long running game show called Shop Till You Drop. I hosted a show for Animal Planet called You Lie Like a Dog, which was essentially the old To Tell the Truth, but with veterinarians and pets. It was crazy fun. I hosted a show for BYU TV, a family game show that was loads of fun. And I was also the announcer on The Price is Right with Drew Carey, which was an incredibly good experience. I'm a huge fan of game shows, so having gotten to work in that world has been amazing.
Yeah, and I went to Truth and Consequence, New Mexico many years ago, which named, there was a game show back in the day. And that game show era in the 50s and 60s was so big. And we've moved away from that, but we're seeing a lot of game shows in some respect coming back. But we have so many different channels to choose from. It's almost information overload. Yeah. But I loved that era. I still watch that stuff on like the different live streaming channels because it's just like honest fun, right?
Yeah.
Compared to like the reality. There's a whole channel
that's just the Bob Barker era of Price is Right, rest his soul. There's a whole channel 24 hours a day. You can just watch old Price is Right. Nothing says I'm homesick from school like watching Bob Barker on The Price is Right.
So true. And it really is people being in their most vulnerable state, right? You're seeing the reaction to something and they forget the camera's on them in a way. The excitement of that. What's your favorite thing about your time doing game show hosting?
One of the things I like to tell people is there's nothing better than giving away other people's money. Right? I mean, I want everybody to win on the game show, right? It's not my money. I get paid the same whether you win or lose. So I just as soon have you win. But honestly, a good host, and you know this, Hilary, because you're a good host, but a good host makes the show about the contestants, right? My job is not to be the star of the show. The games, on a game show, the games are the star of the show. On The Price is Right, the games are the star. And you're there to facilitate the contestant having an amazing time, looking great to the audience, having a blast, winning some money, traffic copping, making sure the show moves properly, but really just staying out of the way and letting the game and the contestant be the star.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And you see the difference in those who do it that way and those who don't. With everything in life, right?
Yeah.
With everything in life. And from the game shows, you've also done a lot of theater. Well, you have done theater. Didn't you do Disney? Didn't you you were our Indiana Jones down there for a while. I remember you talking about that.
I was. So this is sort of a weird tangent. And I think it plays into what you said about you never know exactly what the path is going to be until it reveals itself to you. I studied a lot of classical theater at NYU. And so I did a ton of stage combat, a ton of it, years of it. And I became really very good at it. And I started assisting as an instructor at NYU. And at a certain point in the early 90s, George Lucas and Ringling Brothers partnered to do the George Lucas Super Live Adventure, which was a 2-hour live stunt show of Lucas films. So Star Wars, Indiana Jones, believe it or not, American Graffiti, all as a live stage show that toured Japan for 7 months. And they were looking for stunt people to go on tour in Japan. And this is right as I graduated NYU. And I'm not a stunt guy, but I do know how to sword fight. And there was a whole sequence in this show from the movie Willow, which Lucas produced. So they needed sword fighters. Somehow I got this job. It is my first job out of college as a performer. And I go off to Japan for 7 months and I'm sword fighting. And the whole rest of the show is cast with stuntmen, like proper stuntmen. Most of them work either at one of the theme parks in LA or Florida, or they work on movies. And I am like their pet project because I'm this goofy actor who knows how to sword fight, but doesn't know stunts. And for 7 months, they just taught me stunts. So when I got back to New York after that tour ended, Disney came to New York. They were auditioning for the Indiana Jones stunt show, looking for people. They knew who I was because all of the stunt guys in Florida mentioned me. Oh, there's a guy in New York. We've been on tour with him. You should meet him. And very long story short, too late. I got the job. I relocated to Florida because I thought, why not try that out for a bit? So yes, I did do Disney, and that is where I met my beautiful wife, who was a dancer at Kids of the Kingdom.
Yeah, Karen.
Yeah.
Yes. And you have two beautiful Of course, I met her. She came on the show. We had like a family day, I remember, on Daily Burn way back in the day. But I love watching you both. You've been married quite some time now, right?
Yeah, 24 years this year, together almost 28. I think it's going to stick, Hilary. I think at this point.
I think she's keeping you.
She might. I think she's lost the gift receipt at this point anyway, so she can only get store credit if she takes me back. So
no refunds.
Tries to refund. No refund at this point.
Just credit. What would be one piece of sage advice you'd give for somebody who's been married that long?
Ooh. If you're looking for somebody, it's not about finding the right person. It's about being the right person.
Make the list be the list.
Yeah. Be the things you expect to see in somebody else, for sure.
Absolutely. It's hard to put something out there and say, I want this, but you're not willing to show up for yourself and show up for the other person.
You know what else has been a real lesson of 24 years? So, people meet Karen and sometimes they'll expect my wife to be the female version of me, right? Loud, talkative. And she's not that, right? She's much more thoughtful. She's much more patient. She's much more slower paced. She does not love busy social situations. You'll never walk into a party and find her holding court and mixing drinks, which I'll do all night and have a blast. So one of the things I realized was that because I am such a good talker, I can win any argument I want to, especially with someone who's not a professional talker. And that is absolutely toxic in a relationship, right? I had to learn in the first few years of our relationships that being the best talker didn't make you right, and that it was better to shut up and listen, and that to a degree, being happy is way more important than being right. And it took me some time to learn that. And fortunately, she was patient with me. But we don't fight much. And when we do, we fight well. We fight in a kind, we're going to work through this way. And always with the knowledge that we're going to get to the other side of this. Fighting is annoying, for whatever reason we're at odds about something, but we're going to get to the other side of it. The stakes are always low and we're always respectful.
And that's something your kids are going to witness too. They're going to see how you communicate. They're going to see how you disagree and how I might not agree with you, but let's have a conversation about this so I can hear your side.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Love that. Well, I mean, that's the best. I love that advice. And I feel like that's something I've heard with other couples who have stayed together. And not saying that, look, divorces happen and we've seen it just with our own parents. Sometimes just people are best not being together, and that's okay too. But to go back to your own personal story, as a kid who was a child of divorce, what would you say was the biggest lesson you learned just from witnessing that and being a child of divorce?
My dad, I love my dad a lot, and he's a different man at 82 than he was at 32. So I want to give him credit there.
Right.
But both my dad and my stepdad, the guy my mom married after we left Wisconsin, they taught me how not to be a partner. They taught me how not to be a man. Not to make it gendered, but with a capital M, right? They taught me what a man shouldn't do, what a man shouldn't be, because I loved my mom so much, and I watched her suffer emotionally, spiritually, and existentially in both of these relationships. And I wouldn't have had the words for what was happening to her at that age, but as a man, I do. And I think those two really informed me about what kind of man and what kind of father and what kind of partner and what kind of husband I wanted to be. So I guess I can thank them for that. Guys, thanks.
What a great way to look at it. And I think when you think about the things we've been through, and perfect example are the kind of stories we have here on Hilistically Speaking, those traumas to triumphs. Every mess could be a message, right? What's the takeaway you learn from the things in your life that haven't been so positive? It's part of the reason why I do what I do. It's like not everything is positive, but how can I turn this around and hold space for others, right? And you're doing that as well. You do that every time you're at the mic. You're doing that now with your Good Vibes Collective. And I want to talk about that because it seems, and this is just my interpretation, how I view you, that everything that I've learned about you and that people are getting a chance to learn about you maybe for the first time here on the show is that all these little experiences create the space for something positive. And what can I take away from this? And how can I give back in the world? Especially as we hit that halfway mark, the 50-year mark, we're like, what's it all for? Right? Like, what am I here for? Right? So what, how did that help you become a better man? Like, what was there something that did happen or something in your own personal life that you witnessed from your experience within that relationship, that divorce, that you're like, I don't want to be like that, or just was your own upset, your own trauma?
Well, my mom's second husband, my stepdad, when we moved to Texas, was not a good guy. There was abuse in that relationship. You and I have already spoken more on this podcast than I spoke to him in the 10 years that we lived together. Or not even 10 years. I guess it was less. I was about 15 and a half, 16, and I kind of moved out. I don't know if I fully moved out, but I stopped staying at home. But I will be honest and say I didn't learn the lesson instantly. I don't think any of us do. I think if you went and asked my first couple of long-term girlfriends, was he super sweet and not argumentative? They'd be like, no, he was, and I wasn't, at 19 years old, at 20 years old. I think I was a lousy boyfriend. It wasn't abusive in any way, obviously, but I leaned into the fact that I could out-talk people. I leaned into the fact that I was really verbally agile and could belittle people. Like one of the things about being really quick-witted is it's like the old karate, right? You can use it for good or you can use it for evil. And I don't think I used it for good when I was younger. The good news is the girl that I dated from the time I was 15 until I was 20 is one of my dearest friends. She's one of my wife's dearest friends. She's Aunt Lisa to my children. She lives a mile away from us in Brooklyn, even though we grew up together in Texas. And if you ask her, she'll be like, no, you were a great boyfriend. But I know I wasn't. But only through her grace and forgiveness do I still get to have her in my life and in my kids' life. So I guess what I'm saying is I didn't come out of that relationship and fall into this place where I was suddenly evolved and a good partner and a good man. I had to screw it up again and again. And as I look at every relationship that led to me leading to my wife, I feel like they were training me to be the kind of guy that wouldn't screw it up when I met the right person.
So beautiful. That's That's really that hit me right here. Like I feel like I'm learning something new about you. And I feel like even in the years that we've seen each other on a pretty regular basis, there's these little takeaways that you learn from somebody that you might never have known. So I really appreciate you sharing that and being so vulnerable on the show. And
I get a little emotional. I mean, I don't know,
I'm
like
a little
those people
emotional.
that are watching on a video, I get a little teary when I talk about this stuff. By the way, I want to circle back on my mom's story.
Yeah.
My mom grew up in a small town in Ohio, and she dated this guy from the time she was 15 until she went off to college. And they went off to college together, and he had an accident and broke his back. And he came to her and said, listen, I'm going to be out of school for a year getting my back fixed. I want to break up for that year. I want you to date a little bit because we've never dated anybody but each other. And then when I come back, we're going to get engaged. We're going to get married. Wonderful guy. During that year, she met Jim Roberto. Did not get back together with this guy, moved off, had 3 kids, got divorced, moved to Texas, got into this terrible relationship. Around 49 years old, she finally calls me. I'm off at college, Texas A&M, and says, you got to come home and move me out. I can't take it anymore. I go home. I have to take several friends with me and baseball bats, but we move her out. She's on her own. She turns 50. She's feeling nostalgic. She looks in her old address book and finds this guy's address, Phil. She writes Phil a birthday card. Hey, Phil, I'm 50. I haven't spoken to you in 30 years. I hope you made some better choices than I did, but I was thinking about you. I hope you're doing great. She sends the card. He does not live at that address anymore. He doesn't even live in that part of the state anymore, but the postmaster of that town is a friend of his, sees the name on the envelope, scratches out the address, writes the correct address, sends it on to Phil. Phil gets the card. Phil's been married and divorced. He's got 2 kids. He's been dating a woman for 4 years. He calls the woman that day and says, I can't see you anymore. I have an unresolved issue in my life. I can't see you anymore. He writes back. She writes back. He writes my mom. She writes him. He says, would you please come see me for a weekend? She gets off the plane. He proposes. They've been married 32 years. They're the happiest people you'd ever want to see. So I just wanted to close the loop on this and say that where she was when we were in Texas and where she is now is another reminder that you have no idea what the path is until it unfolds itself.
I'm literally about to cry with that story.
It's the best. I need to make a movie of it. I really do. And it's 100% true. And literally when we started this interview, she just tried to call me, and I'm going to call her back as soon as we're done. She's the best, and we're best friends. And I love Phil so much because he makes her so happy. And it's everything she has deserved all these years, but never have.
Don't we want that for our parents? Like, don't we want them to have the joy? You know, I think about that. My mom remarried after my parents divorced years ago. They remain good friends, but you know, after divorce, it's hard to remain good friends. You have to have your life. You have to heal, right? If it's a healthy divorce. And you know, my mom found her partner at 70 years old and was with him till he passed last year.
Oh,
and
wow.
Even 12, 13 years with somebody in those golden years is so special to have that. And I'm so, so happy for your mom and Phil. Your mother's name, remind me, because we need to give her a shout out for being awesome.
Lynn.
Lynn. And I met your mom when she came to the show, and we were talking about something personal she went through. But this isn't the first time I've heard you talk about her. But that story, JD, is like, I have chills. While you were telling
I know. It's magical. Like, I mean, I don't even know that I believe in fate and things being meant to be. But if I was going to believe in it, it would be that pushed me over the edge, because they were just meant to be. And they're so good for each other. And I do love my mom a lot. And we are super, super close. And I feel really lucky, not only that she's my mom and we're so close, but to still have her. She's 81. She's active. I'm just so like whatever to the universe. I'm really lucky.
Yeah. So Lynn, Phil, if you're listening, watching, thanks for being inspiration for what love can be and taking risks, like writing that letter, whatever.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And for somebody saying, hey, that when they weren't together, and having that postmaster be like, hold on a second. I'm going to help with I'm going to be the middleman in this process, like the angel from wherever, you know, the universe listened, you know, and it just, that's such a great story. Thank you for sharing that. and being just vulnerable and opening up about that. But I do want to mention to those who are tuning in and being a part of this amazing tribe on the Holistically Speaking podcast, I am so elated to have my friend Roberto here. You might know him from Daily Burn. You might know him from doing all the amazing good vibes. We're going to talk about that in a moment, or anything else. I mean, we've seen this guy on TV. You might have even seen him cracking that whip as Indiana Jones, right?
Yeah.
I've seen some pictures. So thank you for being here. If you are touched, moved, and inspired by this podcast episode or this podcast in general, give it a like, give it a follow, subscribe. More conversations like this are coming. So on that note, let's talk about good vibes. This is an amazing community that came out of other communities, but basically, I mean, it's like building, let that vibe be your tribe, right? And I want to talk about that because everything you are is you always put out this positive vibe. You always have such a beautiful message that you share. And sometimes we sit back and we watch you. Like when we were doing Daily Burn, we'd be like, is he coming off? Like, is this out of nowhere? Like, did he write this beforehand? I can't tell you how many times those of us in the cast have stood there like, that is like, where is he coming up with this stuff? It's so authentic. So this is such a perfect platform for you. You don't have to be a coach or a practitioner, have licensing, LMNOPs after your name. You're just being you. So let's talk about good vibes.
Yeah. So the Good Vibes Wellness Group it's an online group that I curate, and I've started a little website for it. But I guess the bottom line of it is every day I make a little video that I post, a 3-4 minute video about a topic, right? Yeah. And the topics can be anything about how do you maintain relationships? Probably a lot of the same stuff, Hil, that you talk about as well, right? How do you maintain relationships? How do you navigate difficult relationships? And we'll talk about that topic for a week. And the backbone of it, honestly, is this community. There's thousands of people in the community sharing their take on it and their stories. And I'd be willing to say that while my role of picking the topic and facilitating it and framing the conversation is important, the most important piece of it is all the people who share their personal stories and the impact that their personal stories have on each other. There are people out there that think I'm the only one going through this. And then they hear somebody else go through it and they suddenly realize they're not alone. And probably for me, the most valuable component of it is connecting people with shared challenges and shared obstacles and shared traumas so that they can feel a little less alone. Problems are problems, but there's nothing more toxic than loneliness and isolation. And I just, if I can combat that in some way by curating a conversation, by saying, here's a tough topic, I'm going to tell a personal story about it. I hope you'll do the same. And then hundreds of people chime in and say, I went through this, I went through that, or I don't struggle with that, but I do struggle with this. And you suddenly see people who would never otherwise share online saying, wow, I didn't know anybody else dealt with that. I do too. And here's my struggle. And if nothing else, we're not solving each other's problems, but we're telling them, you're not alone. You're not alone. I love you. I support you. And you're not alone in this. And I think there's huge value in that.
Absolutely. Community. There's value in community and connection. Your struggle might not be the same as mine, but we're both going through something. So how can I support you and hold space for you and likewise for me? And we need connection. Human connection is so important for our well-being. This is the space that you have created just in your own mind. And like you said, I have my own space. You have a space. There's so many people out there creating community. And it's just who you vibe to. And maybe you're in multiple communities. You need this on a Monday, you need this on a Tuesday, right?
Yeah, agreed.
That's the beauty of realizing that life is abundant, and community, connection, collaboration, creativity, all of those things that you can see within just one group, and pay it forward, right? Pay it forward. Yeah. So how are you looking to move this into the next space?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, the social and emotional part of it is what I just discussed, the curating of conversations, the connecting of community. There's a practical aspect to it too. I curate a new workout every single day. So if you're looking to not have to sift through 12 workout services or YouTube or whatever, I pick a different workout every day and I post that on the website. I curate recipe videos for meal prep, for healthy eating. I'm going to have guests on and do interviews. I'm going to literally probably reciprocate and have the Good Vibes podcast with Hilary as a guest to talk about turning your trauma into triumph. So it's that kind of thing. The value add is sort of giving you a one-stop shopping place where you can get good nutrition information and health information, fitness information, where you can listen to compelling conversations. And then again, have this great overarching conversation week by week where you feel like you're part of a community, sharing the load and making it lighter by carrying it with somebody.
Yeah, it's like group therapy in a way where everyone's getting together,
100%.
kumbaya, right? And what's so beautiful that I've realized from this is that even being in a community that brought us together, we know the fitness instructors and the nutritionists and the coaches and the practitioners and the this and then that. We have our collective already. So there's this beautiful list of people that can share their expertise, right? And if we've learned anything, being an expert in the field, even with what you do with Amazon, right? And what I do at QVC, It's like we become experts in the field, but never to a point where we feel like we know too much. We know just as much as being the consumer of the information as well, right? I think that's what keeps you humble. Is like, I might know a lot about this product, this service, this thing, but I don't know too much to where I know more than somebody else who I can learn from. Like I always say on this podcast, every episode to me is like a master class. Every episode, whether I have the same information you do, there's something in your experience, in your story that I'm going to walk away going, oh my God, that's amazing. Right?
And I talk about it. I talk about it in terms of like thinking of a problem as a 3D object or thinking of a trauma as a 3D object. And every conversation you have is an opportunity just to turn it over a little bit and see it from a different angle, right? Mm-hmm. Right. In your experience, you can only look at it from this side, but every time you have a conversation, it moves just a tiny bit and you're able to see it from a different side and see it from a different side and see it from a different side. And it helps you develop a full 3D understanding of the trauma, of the problem, of the obstacle. And the more you understand it, the better. So lifelong learner here. I literally, I'm always enrolled in a class of some kind. Always. Totally.
And I have the shirt too, work in progress.
Yeah.
Because we're constantly wearing the hard hat in life, right? Yeah. And if you're not, those are questions possibly to ask yourself later when you're like, how come I didn't do this or that? And it's not shaming yourself too. Like not shaming yourself for not being in a certain place at a certain time. I think that's something that people struggle with too, is that, oh, I wish I was at this place or I was this weight or this part of my world didn't exist because you weren't ready to receive the information. Right.
Right.
So those, like when you were in high school, or college, you weren't ready to be the good boyfriend that you are the amazing husband. Right.
Yeah. I wouldn't even go out on a limb and say I'm an amazing husband, but I'm better than I was then. Right. I am, as you say, I'm a work in progress. I'm still trying to get better all the time. Yeah, I think it's important to be able to hold two truths in your head at the same time. I talk a lot about this. Two things can be true. It can be true that you have work to do on yourself to grow, and that you're pretty amazing how you are right now. And you've got to be able to hold those two truths, because if you only think you're amazing, you're not looking at opportunities for growth. And if you only think that you need to grow, then you're not going to be joyful or happy where you are right now. You've got to love who you are and want that person to be even better. Both those things you've got to be able to hold as truths at the same time.
Love it. Love it. All right. So listen, are you ready to answer some questions from our folks that just know some JD Roberto 100%. But want to know more? All right, I got to put on my old lady glasses for this one, because we might have gotten some things. I'm going to go on a couple of the apps to see if anything came in last minute, because I love to give the fairness. But I know we have one question from someone we both know quite well and adore him, and that's Dan Roeder. And Dan's questions is this. And if you know Dan, he is an educator. He's also a trauma-informed practitioner. And working with him is amazing. He's incredible. But he did ask a question. He texted me this morning and he said, if it goes in a youth-focused direction, and I'm like, dude, even if it doesn't, I'm asking this question. If it goes in a youth-focused direction, he has such a great mind of systemic change. I think it is always great to hear from folks how we can best support helping our youth feel supported in agency, access, and aspirations. The floor is yours. Good question.
Yeah, that's
right?
a really good question.
Yeah.
I think we have to find ways. So I'm pretty immersed in the New York City public school system, which
Mhm.
is sometimes amazing and sometimes a disaster.
Mhm.
I think we have to find ways to provide a level playing field and equality of opportunity at an extremely young age.
Mhm.
And here's the thing: we're very prone to saying, "Oh, America's the land of opportunity." But if we're honest with ourselves, we know that socioeconomically that is not true, right?
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
know that socioeconomically, if you are born as the child of a CEO, a white CEO, and you are born as a child of a person of color who's working at Walmart, your opportunities are not remotely equal. We know
Yeah.
that. So I think if we talk about making space for aspiration and opportunity for kids, it's got to start at such a young age. I'm talking like prenatal care, free prenatal care. I'm talking about uh, a minimum wage that means two parents don't have to work 60 hours a week so that somebody can be home with the kids, right? Because
Mhm.
that's such an important part of crafting good citizens and good people. Homework help, free after school tutoring, help with childcare. I think if we can get those things in place, right? I don't think you can come to a kid at 15 years old and say, now we're going to give you a scholarship and that's going to change your life. Well, what did you do for that kid for the first 15 years when you could have really leveled the playing field? I think that's when I would be a big fan of intervening and seeing more support to people with very young children, more opportunity, more equality of access. But I want to do it. I want to do it from the get-go. I want to do it
Mhm.
before the child's even born, so that everybody who's the first step they take in this country and on this planet, they're on an equal footing with everybody else.
Mm. I'm with you on that one. In fact, Dan and I are working on something right now just for more social and emotional learning tools in the
Mm-hmm.
school, like with the work I do with Havening, what he does, and but to start from the point before they even come into this world and are cradled in their mother's or caregiver's hands, to know that they're protected and safe and there's possibility. Yeah,
Yeah, 100%.
that's love that. Love that. Love that. Dan, great question. Thank you so much for being a supporter and just being amazing. This one's from Courtney. And Courtney says, love watching you and seeing you on camera. You're always so positive. But if you weren't doing work on camera as a host, what would you be doing?
I'd be working in medicine for sure.
Which, by the way, we didn't even touch on that. That is something you have a background with your work in
Yeah.
EMS. And do you want to touch on that? Because I think that's really important to share that.
So at some point, it's the late 90s, and my girlfriend, Karen, now my wife, and I have moved to Los Angeles from Florida. And I did a pilot for a game show. And if you do a pilot, they pay you a decent amount of money, but you can't do anything else. You have to sit around and wait while they try to sell the pilot. So I'm sitting there, there's money in the bank, but I can't work. I can't do anything. And I said to Karen, if I'm going to be a game show host, I'm going to need something in my life that has meaning, because this feels like the fluffiest, silliest profession ever. I got to find something that feels consequential and meaningful. So I ordered a course catalog from UCLA, and there was an EMT intensive, 4 weeks, 200 hours or something like that. And you could become an EMT if you went every day to the medical school for it. So I signed up for it, 1998. I signed up for it. I took the class. I loved the class. I've still got time on my hands now. So I started working as an EMT, doing shifts in ERs and shifts on ambulances. And that was whatever that would be, 25 years ago. And I have maintained my EMT certification my entire adult life. I'm still certified as an EMT now in New York State and with the National Registry. And I volunteer as an EMT sometimes. Not that often, but like during the pandemic when I knew they needed extra help and things like that. So it has been an important part of my life to feel like I have this practical set of skills, a set of skills that gives back in a meaningful way to people around me. And yeah, if I wasn't working in media and entertainment, I would for sure be working in the medical profession. I have so much respect for it. And then last year, and you and I spoke about this last year, about a year and a half ago, the hospital just down the street from me put out a call for people that were willing to be trained as New York State rape crisis counselors. They were looking for people to cover overnight shifts. So the hospital has a social work team, And if you're brought in and you're the victim of sexual or domestic violence, a social worker meets with you to advocate for you and help you navigate the medical and legal side of things. But there's no one to do that at night, and there's no one to do it on weekends. So there's a cohort of about 40 of us, and we each pick up 2 or 3 shifts a month, and we're on call. And it's not uncommon for a shift to go by with no calls at all, but it's also not uncommon to get a call at 3 a.m. Someone's just been brought in. They're a survivor of this or that. You need to come in and be their advocate. And I do it. And I was going to say I love it, but I think that's the wrong word. It's really hard work. It's really emotional work. It can be very upsetting work, but it's really important work. And I feel like if there's something that has to get done and you're capable of doing it and you don't, then you're part of the problem. So I had to do it.
And just sitting here thinking about that, you're right. The word, I love that I do it. We do this work, whatever it is. And there's a possibility of the secondary trauma that you might feel from being in that room, listening to the stories, holding space for somebody else. And you have to be very protective of your own well-being too, so that you can show up 110% for that person that you are specifically there for, and as a dad as a father of a daughter and a son, which these things can happen to either, right? No matter what you identify as, there's got to be a feeling like you sit. Do you ever sit there like, good Lord, and think about your own, this nest that you protect back home?
Usually in the moment, I'm sort of there and just there for them and just there as their advocate. There will be times I'll come home and it's now 5 a.m. and they've just been discharged, and you help them get a car service home and you do all that stuff. And then I come home and I take a shower and I maybe have a good cry because I need to, because I've just got to get it out. And at that moment, I will sometimes think of my daughter, especially my daughter, which maybe that's old school thinking, but especially my daughter, because most of the survivors I work with are women or identify as women. Yeah. And so no, it does hit home. Yeah. It's difficult work. It really is difficult work. But it's got to be done. Like all I can think. I was literally on call for 7 or 8 hours last night. I wasn't supposed to be, but the person who was on call was sick. And so myself and another one of the advocates split the shift. And all I could think was, I didn't really want to be on call last night. I didn't know if I had it in me to get called and go in. But I thought, if I don't do this, there will be no one. Someone will get assaulted, someone will get harmed, they will get brought there, and there will be no one to stand next to them. And we do big things like call the special victims unit. We know all the detectives. We have all their direct numbers. We can find housing. We can get their locks changed. We can help them with a protective order. We interface with the medical staff, who is often very hesitant when it comes to sexual assault cases, to do what's called a safe kit. Most people refer to it as a rape kit, but it's a safe kit to help them get a drug screen if they feel like those things were involved. So we do big things, but we also do little things like, hey, do you need a charger for your phone? Do you need a granola bar? Is there anybody I can call for you? Do you need a change of clothes? How are you getting home? Do you have a safe place to sleep? Like, we do all those things. So to think that I didn't really feel like doing it, but if I don't do it, there's no one to do those things for that person at the worst moment of their life. They're alone. And I can't be part of leaving somebody who needs help alone. So you take the shifts. Even when you don't want to, you take the shifts.
So that's what you tell yourself in that moment where you're like rolling over, like, I really just want to sleep.
Yeah. And you say, sure. And I'm sure that person that's at the ER right now really wants to be home and safe, but they're not. So you're not.
So in that moment, being the empathetic, compassionate person you are, how do you protect your own well-being to make sure you're showing up 100% when in your mind, in the back, you're thinking, I don't want to be here?
I never think I don't want to be here once I get there. It's the moment. And honestly, once the call comes, I'm all in. It's the moment where you're sitting staring at your phone and it's 2 a.m. and you should be asleep, but you can't sleep because you're on call. And you don't want to miss the call just in case. I mean, those are the moments where it's like, oh, why did I sign up for this? This is silly. And then the call comes and you remember exactly why you signed up for it. Then you remember exactly why. When you're there with the survivor and you're working with them, I don't want to use the word detachment, but there, you have a really important job to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if you give into the sadness and the anguish and the rage because of just the injustice that has been perpetrated on this person, if you give in to those things, you're not helping them. You're not helping them. It's about you. You're making it about you and indulging yourself. There'll be time to indulge yourself afterwards when you come home and get in the shower and have the cry. Do it, process it. But you don't really have the right. If you take the job, you don't really have the right to do that on the day in the moment. It's not because you're doing them a disservice, right?
Absolutely.
And you know from the trauma-informed care, because we're all trauma-informed, patient-centered, right?
Great.
You know that the most important thing that we're there to do, the most important thing is restore their sense of control and dignity. And one of the ways you have to do that, and this was a real eye-opener for me, you're going to meet police that insist that they file a report. You have to stand between them and the police and say, this is not your choice, detective. Please step out of the room. You're going to meet doctors who are like, well, how many drinks did you have? And you have to stand between them and say, doctor, can I speak to you outside for a second? That's not a relevant question. That's not a relevant question because what you're doing is suggesting that she is somehow culpable. Like you have to be that person in that moment. And that's a big part of the job. And is giving the survivor back control. You don't want to file a police report? You don't have to. Not going to make you.
Such advocacy.
But it's hard because I'm a problem solver. Right. So my instinct is I'm going to come in, I'm going to solve some problems. It's the opposite of the job. The job is not to solve people's problems. The job is to empower them to make the choices they want to make and feel good about, and then to advocate for those choices being respected.
Beautiful.
And that was really an eye opener for me, for a person who thinks of themselves as a problem solver.
Yeah,
not what
you have to
here
step
do.
back. And one thing I hear a lot in you see on the internet and whatnot, the coaches out there, people that are pitching their products, is that I empower people, I heal people, and I'm like, I can't buy into that because in my mind I think I'm a guide. You're a guide. You're guiding them to help them empower themselves.
Yeah.
Right. You're guiding them and helping them and providing assistance, but you're not, but by saying I will empower you to do this, or I will heal you to do, you're taking away the power right there, meaning that they have to rely on you, but it's somebody that they can rely on in the moment to be that advocate for them. And the way you express it and the way you share it and the way you're seeing it, let there be more people out there like you doing it that way. Well,
I can only speak for my
cohort your
of
own
like 40
experience.
people. Yeah. They are an amazing group of people. Great. They are so good. They're such a great group of people. So, oddly, can I say this? Yeah. And this was a bit of a fear for me. And the social workers who run the program really talked to me a lot about it. This cohort of 40, I'm the only man. And I don't know why more men aren't drawn to this kind of work. I'm disappointed to be the only man. I will also say when I get called and it's a sexual assault and the survivor is female, I am mindful of the fact that I might be the last thing they want to see come through the door and say, I'm here to help. And so I have a couple of my female colleagues and on speed dial. And anytime I get a sexual assault case, I call them and say, I'm going in. But if the survivor reacts badly to my presence, I'd like it if you'd come and tag in. Because it's more, again, not about me, more important that they have somebody to do that job. And if they're not comfortable with it being a man, I completely understand. There'll be somebody. It hasn't happened yet, but it's crossed my mind, Well,
let's hope there are more men out there that will take this and think about what they can do and how they can provide and be of service in a different way, or those who identify as, because that is amazing that you're the only guy there, you would think, but you're right. Some people are like, you are the last thing I want to see in this moment right now. Thank you very much. Right. But again, it's projecting what we think control. They think. Right.
Yeah, you're right.
Right. Like you're thinking that's probably, but you never know. They could be like, I would love to have a man that I trust in this moment right now. Where were you? So, but clearly you're doing something right because how long have you been doing it?
About a year.
Yeah. So, clearly something you're doing is right and everything's aligning to where you're the right person, the right time to show up in the right moment when somebody's needed. But with that being said, what does JD do for your own well-being? Like, what are some things that you do for self-care?
I play guitar
Mm-hmm.
and I sing. I go up on my roof and I play guitar and I sing. And I am, if you were in some town outside of Dallas, I would never qualify for Dallas. If you were in some town outside of Dallas and you were in a not so great bar and there was a guy there with a guitar singing, that's probably the level that I'm at.
Okay, so we're showing up for your concert in Denton.
If you're in Euless or Bedford,
we
Texas,
know this,
right? You and I are dropping. We're name dropping.
They're like, where
North
are these
Texas
places?
towns,
Flower
right?
Mound,
Exactly.
right?
I don't even think I could qualify for Plano, but I may be the outskirts of Amarillo. Anyway, that's about my quality level. I'm not very good at it, but it brings me tremendous joy. I will sit up on my roof and I will play guitar and I will belt out songs and I video game a little bit. Yeah. I'll just, I'll hang out with my kids. There's something for me therapeutic about making pancakes for the kids. So it's a win-win because they love pancakes. So, it's just that kind of stuff. It's super simple stuff that requires very little of me mentally and energy wise and feeds my soul. A little bit of music, a little bit of family time. That's all I need.
I love that. And you're not even mentioning fitness, by the way. Like I know, and you're a guy that's done some marathons, and obviously we know each other from a fitness background, but you're not even going there.
I don't use it as an emotional regulator. No, it just doesn't do that for me that much. I lift, I still run a little bit, and it's great, and it's a super important part of my life. But if we're really talking about when I'm not me, how do I get back there? My family and a little bit of music.
Love it. Love it. I've heard you play at the top of that, on that rooftop. You post some stuff every once in a while. I think I love that. All right. We have one more question and then we're going to get into the rapid fire here. Okay. This is from Beth. Beth actually would like to know, do you have a favorite job that you've had? Of all the things you've mentioned, do you have like something that's a favorite?
I'll tell you the job that should have been my favorite and wasn't, and then the one that was. The job that should have been my favorite is that I spent a year working for Discovery Channel, traveling the world, scuba diving with sharks. Should have been the best job ever. I'm a diver. I worked as a rescue diver back when I was an EMT. I worked as a rescue diver.
What have you done?
I told you I'm always taking a class. I'm a certified dive master, and when I was a dive master and an EMT, I worked as a rescue diver. Okay, so I spent a year traveling the world: South Africa, French Polynesia, way out in the Pacific, the Bahamas, all over the world diving. It was a grueling job. It should have been the greatest job in the world, and the diving was good and the travel was good, but man, was it grueling. I would probably say that the job I just wrapped at Daily Burn was the best job I ever had. And for a couple of reasons. First of all, I did over 2,000 episodes of it. So I really felt like that was my show. I really felt like I owned it. It wasn't my show. Financially speaking, it belonged to somebody else. But it felt like my show. It felt like I really perfected the craft. Perfected is the wrong word. I really grew in the craft of speaking to people, of delivering a message, of connecting, of listening, digesting what I was getting back, giving it back. I felt like I learned more in the 8 years that I did that show than anywhere else. And I also, not for nothing, worked with some of the most amazing people I've ever been able to spend time with. And it was exhausting some days, and we were overworked and underpaid, and I didn't care a bit because I got to work with such great people.
I will have to agree. It was a wonderful experience coming from a different side, and even being able to fill in for you once and just being on that set for so many years, just from day one. And the things that you take away from moments like that, I love that you have that kind of experience because it can be very grueling to be a host and and then you move into the producer space. You had even more responsibilities, but you always you could tell you loved that job. I'll be honest. As someone who does similar work, you can tell. You can tell just the way you showed up. It wasn't like red light on, now I'm on. You were on because I think you being on was you being really enjoying being there.
Yeah, I really did. And I just want to say for the record, because the unraveling of that job and that show was messy and the company didn't handle it very well. But I do want to say this.
Yeah.
I love Daily Burn.
Yeah.
They were never anything but fair to me. They did not blindside me. They did not, quote unquote, fire me. They're just not a job anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Once they decided not to do the show, they were kind. They were fair. They were wonderful employers. I have nothing but good feelings about that job. And I know that the way it unraveled, people ended up feeling angry at this person or that person or the show. And I make space for everybody to feel that. But please don't feel it on my account, because I'm forever grateful that they gave me the chance to do 8 years and 2,000 shows of something I love.
I am so glad that you shared that. You know, that was a question I had on my mind. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm glad you were the one to bring that up. And hopefully people will be open to the possibility. But you know what? They're going to feel what they feel. And that's okay too. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. All right. So as we wrap, I want to ask you, this is something fun I do with my show, a rapid fire. I've been writing down some, look at you, like getting ready.
Speed round. This is the game show in me. All right, here we go.
Right. Oh, I know you're going to love it. Right. You're the perfect person for this. Okay. So I'm going to throw out like one word or maybe two words, depending, that have to do with our conversation. Yes. Go in for a moment, find your inner JDPs.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Here we go.
And I'm going to throw them out there at you. And then you just come back with the first word that comes to mind.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait, you have the ability to bleep things, right?
No, they don't do that on this show.
Okay. I'm kind of known for being only PG-13. I'm going to try to keep it there.
No, please don't. I like putting the E rating next to my podcast.
Okay.
When I get to put explicit, I'm like, yes, I've made it.
I'm a sweet guy, but I'm also, a Brooklyn Italian. So, yeah.
Bring
I know all
it
the words.
on.
Okay, here we go.
Let people see that side of you. Okay, here we go. Host.
Most.
Stunt.
Man.
Fitness.
Guru.
Forgiveness.
Always.
Education.
Important.
Marriage.
Critical.
Divorce.
Unthinkable.
Abuse.
Trauma.
EMT.
Love it.
Safety.
Home.
Good vibes.
Joy.
Oh, I love ending with that. I love ending with joy. You were so PG. I just want you to have Tourette's in the moment real quick. I wanted to hear that other side of you.
My kids get to hear that other side of me, and not even out of anger. My kids are growing up in Brooklyn, New York. Imagine what they hear walking down the street. I don't know. We're pretty loose with language in my house. I think people would be surprised how many F-bombs get dropped in my house, but joyful F-bombs. I'm not a fan of profanity out of anger. I'm a fan of profanity in joy. If my son when my son got his SAT scores, I was like, you are a fucking badass.
You're using
I said to my 17, by the way, there you go, folks. I'm so sorry. Now we get an E next to the thing.
Yay!
Because he is, right? I want him to, I don't know. Joyful profanity I'm a huge fan.
I like that. Joyful profanity, right? Listen, they're just words. We make words mean something, whatever context they're in, what the word is. A word has meaning when we put context to it and emotion to it, right? That's why it's so careful how we talk to ourselves.
But I agree with that. But, I also feel like I'm always trying to be respectful of the fact that my tolerance for profanity or for this word or for that word isn't anybody else's tolerance.
Very true.
And for me to assume that it is unfair. So I'm always really hesitant to drop those words. I mean, anyway, it's a complicated topic. They are just words. I feel like if you're angry, you should be smart enough, A, to get that anger under control and not have an outburst. And B, you should be smart enough to come up with better, more clever words. If you're saying it out of joy, celebrate. Use whatever. There's no bad celebration language to me.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's meeting people where they're at. Because if some people if they're uncomfortable with it, you're not going to drop that on Bible study on a Sunday morning, right?
I am not going to do that at all.
Are you going to Bible study on Sunday morning?
Not this week. This week I'll be up in Vermont for Labor Day weekend.
How is that? How is Vermont for you? Are you loving it up there?
Vermont's great.
Yeah.
It's my getaway. It's my getaway. I dream of retiring up there on 12 acres and a big, beautiful 12 acres, but 11 and a half of it's just woods, just forest, trees everywhere. The anti-Brooklyn. I love it.
I've been up there. It's beautiful. There's a lot of really beautiful places up there, and I'm glad you're enjoying it with the family. All right. So final thought. What would you like to leave with Holistically Speaking listeners and viewers?
You're great how you are. You really are genuinely great how you are. The fact that you showed up to listen to this and that you listened to this incredibly long podcast because you want to learn and you want to grow, that's a sign that you're doing it right. You're winning. Praise yourself right now for the work that you're doing and hold the two thoughts in your head. You're amazing. You can be even better.
Thank you for that. That's great. I took away something in that. Again, masterclass with everyone on this show. It makes such a difference. I can't ever stop doing this because it's like free education for me.
It's what you said. It's therapy, right?
It's therapy.
We're not
for me
providing
too.
other people therapy. We're doing therapy for us.
Yeah, it's a good selfish, quite frankly. That's how I look at it, you know?
I like that phrase.
Thank you, JD. You are a joy. I adore you. I love you. And I'm so glad to call you a friend. Thanks for being here.
I feel the same, Hilary. Thanks for having me.
We packed a lot into this episode. If you want to connect with JD and grab some of those good vibes, head on over to the Good Vibes Wellness website or connect with his group on the Facebook page. I'm there. Others are there. It's all about raising the vibe in order to live well. And you can also connect with JD on his social media at JD Roberto. I will share all those links in the podcast notes. And don't forget, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the Holistically Speaking podcast. If you are new here, listening for the first time, thank you so much for being here. I am so glad that you're tuning in. If you've been here for the long haul, thank you so much for all your support. I always appreciate those ratings, those reviews that you do on Apple and on Spotify. I read every single one of them, and anywhere else that your headphones take you. And if this episode has touched, moved, and inspired you in any way, consider paying it forward. Share it with somebody else in your community. Let them know that this show exists. I appreciate it, and I know that your friends will too. And let's bump it up a notch. We're talking about community. Are you part of the Hug It Out community in healing, understanding, and gratitude towards self? This is another supportive space, safe space with daily tips and tools. We have fun. It's all trauma-informed support from not only yours truly, but others in the community as well that are looking for powerful ways to be kind to the mind. And don't forget about my Havening happy hours. They are monthly. This is a great way to create the space and the grace for your own healing, self-regulation, for self-care and self-soothing, and it's all neuroscience based. I will lead you and pave the way at the end of every month going into a strong new month, and you can register in the listen notes to join us for the next one that's coming up really soon. Plus, since we're talking about raising the vibe, you know I'm always about amplifying voices here on Holistically Speaking, and I want to hear from you, right? Leave an audio message. Let me know what's going on with you, and I will share it on a future episode if you are going to answer this prompt. You go to speakpipe.com/holistically speaking. I've been asking you to share what you're grateful for about yourself lately. That's been the big thing. We're going to share this in a future episode, but I want to hear your voice. What's your good vibe? We'll put it in different words right now. What's your good vibe that makes you proud about who you are? What are you grateful for on how you're showing up in this world? Share it, press record, and I will share it on the show. And don't forget to mention where you're from, why you keep tuning in. If you're a podcaster, share the name of your show. I'm all about paying it forward, paying it back to you for what you're putting out there in the world. That's what it's all about, is building that community in many different ways. Holistically Speaking is edited by Two Market Media with music by my dear friend Lipbone Redding and vibes created by you. Sending out the good vibes to all of you, my sunshines. I love you. I believe in you. Be well. And as always, be kind to your mind. I'll see you next week.